What if your weekend do-it-yourself repair is slowly destroying your GMC? YouTube makes everything look easy, but one wrong move on these 12 things, and you're looking at thousands in damage. My neighbor tried to save 50 bucks, ended up with a $4,000 engine rebuild. Stay until the end for the do-it-yourself job that wrecks more GMC trucks than anything else. Looks simple, takes 10 minutes, destroys engines. Mistake 1. Fixing the air conditioning yourself with cheap recharge cans. Let's start with one of the most common do-it-yourself jobs that goes wrong. You're sweating through summer. Your AC blows warm. You go to the auto parts store and grab a $20 can of refrigerant with a gauge on top. Easy fix, right? Here's what actually happens. Those cheap recharge cans don't tell you what's already in your system. They just add more refrigerant. If your system has a leak, and it probably does if it's low, you're not fixing anything. You're just masking the problem. That's not the worst part. Most do-it-yourself recharges overcharge the system. Too much refrigerant creates excessive pressure. Your compressor has to work harder, the seals start to fail, and within 6 months to a year, your compressor burns out completely. A proper AC diagnosis and recharge at a shop costs $150 to $250. They'll find the leak, fix it, evacuate the system properly, and recharge it to the exact specification. A new AC compressor? That's $900 to $1,200 for parts and labor on a GMC Sierra. And if the compressor fails catastrophically, it sends metal shavings through your entire AC system. Now you need a new compressor, condenser, evaporator, and expansion valve. That's $2,000 to $3,000. All because you tried to save $100 with a $20 can. If your AC isn't blowing cold, take it to a shop. Let them diagnose it properly. The money you spend on a real repair is nothing compared to replacing the entire system. Mistake 2. Skipping spark plug replacement. Here's one that sneaks up on people. GM recommends replacing spark plugs every 97,000 to 100,000 miles on most 5.3 and 6.2 liter engines. A lot of owners see that number and think they can push it to 120,000, maybe 150,000. Bad idea. As spark plugs wear, the gap between the electrodes increases. That means weaker spark. Weaker spark means incomplete combustion. Incomplete combustion means unburned fuel going straight into your catalytic converter. Your catalytic converter is designed to handle small amounts of unburned fuel. But when worn spark plugs send excessive fuel through the exhaust for thousands of miles, the converter overheats. The internal honeycomb structure melts and breaks apart. And now you're looking at a $1,200 to $2,000 catalytic converter replacement. I've seen this happen more times than I can count. Owner comes in with a check engine light. Codes show catalyst efficiency below threshold. They're shocked when I tell them the root cause was spark plugs they should have changed 30,000 miles ago. A spark plug replacement costs $350 to $500 at a dealer. Do it yourself. You're looking at $50 to $150 for a set of 8 AC Delco Iridium plugs. That's it. That's all it takes to protect a $2,000 catalytic converter. Change your spark plugs on schedule. Don't push it. Mistake 3. Never flushing brake fluid. Most GMC owners never think about brake fluid. It's in a sealed system. What could go wrong? A lot, actually. Brake fluid is hygroscopic. That means it absorbs moisture from the air over time, even in a sealed system. After 3 to 4 years, your brake fluid can contain 3 to 4% water. That doesn't sound like much, but it's enough to cause serious problems. Water in brake fluid lowers the boiling point. Fresh DOT4 fluid boils at over 400 degrees. Contaminated fluid can boil at 300 degrees or less. When you're coming down a mountain grade or towing a heavy load, your brakes generate a lot of heat. If the fluid boils, you get vapor bubbles in the lines. Vapor compresses. Fluid doesn't. Suddenly, your brake pedal goes to the floor, and you have no stopping power. There's another problem most people don't know about. That moisture causes corrosion inside your brake system. Your ABS module has tiny valves and passages that corrode from the inside out. Your brake calipers develop internal rust that causes them to stick. Your brake lines corrode and eventually fail. A brake fluid flush costs $150 to $250 at a shop. You can do it yourself for about $30 in fluid. An ABS module replacement, $800 to $1,500. Caliper replacement, $300 to $500 per caliper. Brake line replacement after a failure? You don't want to know, and you definitely don't want to find out while you're driving. Flush your brake fluid every 3 years or 45,000 miles. It's cheap insurance for one of the most important safety systems on your truck. Mistake 4. Buying cheap aftermarket brake pads. While we're talking about brakes, let's talk about pads. I get it. You see AC Delco pads for $80 and some no-name brand for $30. They look the same. They fit the same. Why pay more? Because cheap brake pads destroy your rotors. Low-quality pads use inferior friction materials. Some contain hard metal particles that score your rotors with every stop. Others use compounds that don't dissipate heat properly, causing hot spots that warp your rotors. I've seen brand new rotors destroyed in less than 15,000 miles by cheap pads. The owner thought they were saving $50 on pads. They ended up spending $400 on new rotors plus another brake job. And here's what really gets me. Cheap pads don't even stop as well. They have longer stopping distances, more brake fade under heat, and they wear out twice as fast, so you're replacing them more often anyway. Quality brake pads from AC Delco, Wagner, or Power Stop cost $60 to $100 for a set. They last 30,000 to 60,000 miles, and they won't destroy your rotors. Cheap pads cost $30 to $40. They last 10,000 to 15,000 miles, and they'll cost you $300 to $500 in rotor damage. Do the math. Buy quality pads. Quick thing, if you're learning something new here, hit subscribe. I put out videos every week to help GMC owners avoid expensive repairs and keep more money in their pockets. Mistake 5. Ignoring wheel bearing noise. If you hear a humming or growling noise that changes with your speed, that's probably a wheel bearing going bad. A lot of owners hear that noise and think they can live with it for a while. It's just a noise, right? The truck still drives fine. Here's what happens when you ignore a bad wheel bearing. The bearing continues to wear. The internal clearances increase. The wheel hub starts to wobble, just slightly at first, but it gets worse. That wobble puts stress on your CV axle, your tie rod ends, and your ball joints. Components that should last 150,000 miles start failing at 80,000. And if you really ignore it, the bearing can seize completely. When that happens at highway speed, your wheel can lock up or even separate from the hub. I don't need to tell you how dangerous that is. A wheel bearing and hub assembly replacement costs $400 to $500 per wheel on a GMC Sierra. That's parts and labor. But if you wait until the bearing damages other components, you're looking at tie rod ends for $200 to $300, ball joints for $300 to $500, and CV axles for $400 to $600. When you hear that humming noise, get it checked. A $500 repair today prevents a $2,000 repair next month. Mistake 6. Using wrong DEF fluid on diesel. If you own a Duramax diesel, pay attention to this one. Diesel exhaust fluid, DEF, is required for your emission system to work properly. It's a mixture of urea and deionized water that gets injected into your exhaust to reduce nitrogen oxide emissions. The problem is, some owners try to save money by buying cheap DEF from unknown sources. Or worse, they accidentally put something else in the DEF tank. I've seen owners put windshield washer fluid in the DEF tank because the bottles look similar. I've seen them use water because they ran out of DEF on a road trip. I've even seen diesel fuel accidentally pumped into the DEF tank. Any contamination in your DEF system is catastrophic. The DEF injector has extremely tight tolerances. Contamination causes it to clog or fail. The SCR catalyst gets poisoned and stops working. The DEF pump corrodes internally. If you put the wrong fluid in your DEF tank and start the engine, you're looking at $3,000 to $8,000 in repairs. Worst case, diesel fuel in the DEF tank can cost $15,000 to fix because the entire system needs to be replaced. Only use DEF fluid that meets ISO 22241 specification. Buy it from reputable sources, truck stops, dealerships, or major auto parts stores. Check the expiration date, and for the love of your wallet, make sure you're putting it in the right tank. Mistake 7. Washing your engine bay incorrectly. A clean engine bay looks great, and there's nothing wrong with cleaning your engine if you do it right. But I've seen so many owners grab a pressure washer and blast everything under the hood. Water goes everywhere, into connectors, into sensors, into the fuse box, into the ECU housing. Modern trucks have dozens of electrical connectors and sensors in the engine bay. They're designed to handle rain and road spray, but they're not designed for direct high-pressure water. When water gets forced into these connectors, It causes corrosion on the pins. That corrosion creates resistance. Resistance causes voltage drops, and voltage drops cause all kinds of weird electrical problems. Misfires, rough running, check engine lights, sensors reading incorrectly. The worst part? These problems often don't show up immediately. The corrosion builds over weeks or months. By the time you have symptoms, you've forgotten all about that engine wash you did last summer. Diagnosing electrical gremlins is expensive. You're paying a technician $150 an hour to chase down intermittent problems. I've seen owners spend $500 to $1,000 in diagnostic time before finding a corroded connector that was caused by improper engine washing. If you want to clean your engine bay, use a garden hose on low pressure. Cover sensitive electronics with plastic bags. Use a degreaser and brushes instead of high-pressure water. And let everything dry completely before starting the engine. Or just leave it alone. A dirty engine runs exactly the same as a clean one. Mistake 8. Ignoring serpentine belt cracks. Your serpentine belt drives everything: alternator, power steering pump, water pump, AC compressor. When it fails, your truck stops. Most owners never look at their serpentine belt. It's out of sight, out of mind. But belts wear out. They develop cracks on the ribbed side. The rubber gets hard and glazed, and eventually they snap. When your serpentine belt breaks while driving, you lose power steering immediately. Your steering wheel becomes extremely hard to turn. You lose your alternator, so your battery starts draining. And most importantly, you lose your water pump. Without the water pump circulating coolant, your engine overheats within minutes. If you don't pull over immediately, you're looking at warped cylinder heads, a blown head gasket, or a seized engine. A serpentine belt costs $25 to $40. Replacement at a shop runs $200 to $350 total. Do-it-yourself, it takes about 30 minutes on most GMC trucks. But if that belt breaks and you overheat your engine, head gasket repair costs $2,000 to $3,000. A warped head that needs machining adds another $500. And if you seize the engine, you're looking at a complete replacement, $8,000 to $12,000. Check your belt every oil change. Look for cracks, fraying, or glazing. If it's showing wear, replace it. A $40 belt can save you a $12,000 engine. Mistake 9. Letting your fuel tank run low constantly. Some owners run their tank down to empty before filling up. They figure they're getting every last mile out of their fuel. But this habit destroys fuel pumps. Your fuel pump sits inside the fuel tank, submerged in gasoline. That fuel does two critical things. It cools the pump and lubricates the pump's internal components. When you run the tank low, the pump isn't fully submerged. It runs hotter, the bearings wear faster, and all the sediment and debris that settles at the bottom of your tank gets sucked into the pump. Over time, this causes the pump to fail prematurely. Instead of lasting 200,000 miles, it fails at 100,000. A fuel pump replacement on a GMC Sierra costs $600 to $900. On a Yukon or larger SUV, you're looking at $900 to $1,100. There's also the issue of fuel injectors. When you run the tank low, you're pulling in more sediment and contaminants. These clog your injectors over time, causing rough running, misfires, and poor fuel economy. Keep your tank above a quarter full, always. It costs you nothing, and it protects a $600 fuel pump. Mistake 10. Skipping transfer case fluid on 4WD. If you have a four-wheel drive GMC, you have a transfer case, and that transfer case needs fluid changes just like your transmission and differentials. GM recommends changing transfer case fluid every 45,000 miles under normal conditions, or every 25,000 miles if you do a lot of towing or off-road driving. But most owners don't even know the transfer case exists. They change their oil religiously and completely ignore the transfer case until it starts making noise. Transfer case fluid breaks down over time. It loses its ability to lubricate the gears and chains inside. Metal particles accumulate, and eventually, the internal components start to wear. The first sign is usually a grinding or whining noise when you engage four-wheel drive. By the time you hear that noise, damage is already happening. The transfer case fluid change costs $100 to $150 at a shop. Do-it-yourself costs about $40 to $60 in fluid. A transfer case rebuild? $2,500 to $4,000. A complete replacement can run even more. I've seen transfer cases fail at 80,000 miles because the fluid was never changed. That's a $3,000 repair that could have been prevented with a $100 service. If you have four-wheel drive add transfer case fluid to your maintenance schedule. It's one of the most overlooked services on GMC trucks. Mistake 11. Installing cheap LED headlight bulbs. Upgrading to LED headlights seems like a no-brainer. Better visibility, longer life, lower power consumption. What's not to like? The problem is those $30 LED bulbs from Amazon. Cheap LED bulbs cause a whole list of problems. They draw different wattage than your factory halogen bulbs, which confuses your truck's electrical system. You get flickering warning lights and error codes, but the real damage happens from heat. Quality LED bulbs have proper heat sinks and cooling fans. Cheap ones don't. They run hot, really hot. That heat melts your headlight housing from the inside. It warps the reflector bowl. It damages the wiring connector. I've seen headlight assemblies completely destroyed by cheap LED bulbs. The lens is foggy and yellowed. The reflector is warped. The connector is melted. And now, instead of upgrading your bulbs, you're replacing the entire headlight assembly. A headlight assembly for a GMC Sierra costs $400 to $800 per side. That's $800 to $1,600 for both headlights because you tried to save money with cheap LED bulbs. If you want LED headlights, buy quality bulbs from reputable brands. Expect to pay $100 to $200 for a set. They'll have proper heat management, correct beam patterns, and they won't destroy your housings. Or just stick with the factory halogen bulbs. They work fine. Mistake 12. Ignoring small coolant leaks. This is the one I warned you about at the beginning. The do-it-yourself mistake that destroys more engines than anything else. You notice a small puddle of coolant under your truck, or maybe your coolant level drops a little between oil changes. It's not a big deal, right? You just top it off and keep driving. This is how engines die. A small coolant leak doesn't fix itself. It gets worse. That slow drip becomes a steady leak. That steady leak becomes a major failure, usually at the worst possible time. But here's what really kills engines. Owners who just keep topping off the coolant instead of fixing the leak. Every time your coolant level drops, your engine runs a little hotter. Not enough to trigger a warning light, but enough to cause damage over time. The cylinder heads expand and contract more than they should. The head gasket gets stressed. The aluminum components warp slightly. Then one day, the leak gets bad enough that you lose coolant faster than you can add it. The engine overheats, and now that head gasket that was barely hanging on finally fails. A small coolant leak, maybe a hose clamp, a water pump weep hole, or a radiator crack, costs $100 to $500 to fix depending on the source. A head gasket replacement costs $2,000 to $3,000 on a GMC Sierra. If the heads are warped and need machining, add another $500 to $1,000. If the engine block is damaged, you're looking at a complete engine replacement. I've seen owners spend $50 on coolant over 6 months, topping off a slow leak, and then spend $4,000 on a head gasket job. If you see coolant under your truck, find the leak and fix it. Don't just top it off and hope for the best. That small leak will become a big problem, and it will cost you thousands. Those are 12 do-it-yourself mistakes that cost GMC owners thousands of dollars every year. Most of them are easy to avoid. You just have to know what to look for. If you want to learn more about protecting your GMC, check out my video on the 7 warning sounds that mean you need to stop driving immediately. And if you're thinking about buying a used GMC, watch my video on the model years everyone avoids that are actually gold mines. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.